How do you, in your career, how have you sort of gleaned information about how to do your job better by watching someone else? Because I think this all the time, even in terms of podcast interviews, and I watch some of my favorite people interview, and my favorite conversations I grew up doing theater, and in theater, there's this idea of yes and I love interviewers that I feel like have a yes and quality, meaning they affirm what you just said and they want to add to it and they want to sort of take it to the next place. So I'm constantly trying to see, how do people do that in the podcast space? But what does it look like for you in your career if you're sitting with someone like Barbara and you're watching her? Are you taking, oh, look how she did that thing, and how could I then do my version of this? Like, how do you learn by watching?
Yeah, so television is such a practical application. So when I started in the business, I mean, my God, I was supposed to be a classical violinist. That's what I was as a kid. That was going to be my career. Then I was supposed to be a lawyer, and then I still want to be a lawyer, but I never got there. I took the LSATs, but never got to law school. So I fell into journalism kind of as a fluke, and then I really had to learn through practical application and watching other people, because I hadn't really studied this in college. And whether or not you had studied the history of communication and all of that anyway, TV is just such a sink or swim kind of craft. So you learn as you go, which is why it's always a good idea to start out in a small market where you can make your mistakes and not ruin your career. Actually, what we've seen happen over time in TV is that, like, reality stars suddenly become national television hosts. And I just watch this from afar and I'm like, oh God, this is going to be a bomb waiting to explode, because they don't have the experience of coming up the ranks and making the mistakes when you can. And so, I think observation is something I've done my whole life, whether it was when I was playing the violin as a kid so seriously, and I would watch my teacher do it, and then I would do it, or watch like a professor in school write out the problems on the board, and then I would do it. That's how I've always learned. So maybe TV was a good craft for me. And I spent hours studying people and the way in which they interviewed. If you go back and you look at Barbara Walters' interviews, you will see that not much ever flustered her. I mean, she always got people to cry, remember?
Yes. They'd be like, I promised myself I wasn't going to do this.
Yes, but she didn't cry.
Right.
It was very interesting. And you don't necessarily remember her like being confrontational or having to get a word in like other journalists. She was perfectly fine sitting back and waiting for the person to tell her something that they had never said before. And that's when you know that the interviewer is actually really good, because the person sitting across from them feels comfortable enough to tell them something or show emotion like they never have before. So I'm very much into watching, like I would watch her hands and where she would put them, and they were never shaking. I mean, that's something you have to think about when you're on TV, is your body language and your hands. And are you fidgeting? Because you would never want to give that aura of being uncomfortable over to the viewer. The whole essence of them wanting to watch you is that they feel like you're their friend. And that you're totally comfortable. So there's a million ways in which you can learn through observation. And so I guess in a way, finding TV was a good thing for me, because I had been doing it my whole life.
That's so cool. I love hearing how other people learn and take things in. And I think it's important too for listeners or people who are checking this out, because so often you see someone and you think, oh, she came into the world with this grace, or she came into the world with this knowledge or this ability. And so you talk yourself out of trying anything because you don't think that you have natural talents and skills that would make you great. And the reality is that you have been working at this for so long. Any of us have been working at this craft, and we'll continue to work at our own craft, knock wood, for as long as we have on this planet. It's really important for people to understand that, like, no, we are also trying to learn and trying to get better and trying to improve. And hopefully if you see either of us, a decade from now in our own ways, we will have, gleaned some more information that we can take into the work.